Do you think you could live a life of optimism and adventure if you spent most of your childhood and part of your adult life sick in bed? Let's look at the inspiration for Robert Louis Stevenson's poem, The Sick Child, and more importantly, his courage and sense of adventure throughout his life. Robert Louis Balfour Stevenson was born in 1850 in Edinburgh, Scotland. Louis, as he was called, never Robert or Bob, was an extremely delicate child and required the attention of a nursemaid long after most children would have outgrown this kind of care. Because he was frail in his childhood, and indeed remained so throughout his short life, he spent many weeks in bed. In memoirs of himself, written in San Francisco in 1880, Stevenson was explicit. "I was an only child, intelligent and sickly." First came a prolonged attack of croup, a croaking cough, when he was 29 months old. Each of the 9 following years brought its woes in turn, dressed as fevers, sweating dreams, and endless days in bed. The illnesses persisted. 5 weeks in the autumn of 1858, when he could not even sit up in bed. In 1859, chickenpox, followed by months of invalidism. In 1861, whooping cough, followed by 6 weeks in bed. Given the mortality rates of the day, it is some sort of miracle that his exhausted body survived the endless assaults. The effect of sickness on his personality was equally powerful. Oddly enough, this did not make him shy and withdrawn. He was bubbling over with the joy of life. From earliest boyhood, Louis was an omnivorous reader, with particular preference for tales of adventure, a preference which never left him and which naturally led to his most famous book, Treasure Island, first published in 1881. From childhood, his chest and lungs were chronically weak, and in the pre-antibiotic era, for those who could afford it, travel was the prescribed medicine. In 1876, he joined his cousin in France. There he met Fanny Osborne, an American woman. Separating from her husband, she had gone to Paris with her 3 children. When Louis and Fanny met, it was truly love at first sight. In 1879, Louis decided to follow her to California. His health was as precarious as ever. It is fairly certain that he was tubercular. This was the opinion of most of the doctors he consulted. At any rate, health or no, money or no, Louis was determined to join Fanny. Stevenson was what the Californians of the time called a lunger, forever in search of the climate which would supply the clean air which in turn might defer the death sentence that hung over him. In 1880, Louis and Fanny were married in San Francisco, and after a time spent in the mountains of California, they returned to Scotland. Fanny was made welcome when his parents realized that Louis was overflowing with happiness. Again in search of health, the Stevensons went abroad in the fall of 1880, this time to Davos in Switzerland, then a popular resort for tubercular patients. When the visit to Switzerland was over, the family returned to Scotland. The summer months of 1881 were particularly atrocious. Edinburgh had been pronounced by doctors to be hazardous for the invalid's chest. Suffering from a chronic lung condition, the 31-year-old was keen to escape to the Scottish countryside for the sake of his health, to breathe in the clean, fresh air. The cottage of a recently deceased spinster lady was leased for Louis, his new wife Fanny, and her 12-year-old son Lloyd. The Highland air was smoke-free. It could have been idyllic, but it was, Louis confided in a letter, hell, largely because the weather was absolutely and consistently vile. In the cottage, they spent their days reading, writing, and drawing. One of Louis's random drawings was a map which he named Treasure Island, which you can guess inspired the adventure novel to follow. As the years went on, the family moved to multiple locations, such as England, New York, and San Francisco. From there they took a cruise through the Pacific, including visiting the Marquises, Tahiti, Honolulu, Samoa, and Australia. In Australia, illness caught up with Louis again, and again they booked passage and revisited the islands. On their return to Sydney, Louis and Fanny decided to settle permanently in Samoa. Surrounded as they were by tropical forests, with a mountain rising behind them, they built a house both Samoan and Scottish in character. Sadly, it all came to an end in 1894. Louis was helping his wife Fanny on the veranda and gaily talking when suddenly he put both hands on his head and cried out, "What's that?" Then he asked quickly, "Do I look strange?" Even as he did so, he fell on his knees beside her. He was helped into the great hall, between his wife and his body servant. Losing consciousness instantly, as he lay back in the armchair that had once been his grandfather's, he died at 10 minutes past 8, in the 45th year of his age. The people of Samoa, who had come to love Louis, built him a large tomb in their fashion. The chiefs forbade the use of firearms on the mountain so that birds might always come there, and there Louis rests now, with Fanny beside him. So was he the sick child of his own poem? I'd have to say yes, considering his lifetime of health issues, plus a poem he later wrote in honor of the nanny who had taken care of him for so many years. To Allison Cunningham, from her boy, the angel of my infant life, from the sick child, now well and old, take, nurse, the little book you hold. As we read over his letters, poems, and essays, and as we read what his friends thought of him, again and again we hear of his gaiety and courage, not a grim courage, but rather the reflection of a sanguine, optimistic nature. Rest in peace, Robert Louis Stevenson. Thank you for watching. Please like this video, subscribe to this channel for new videos every week or two, and see the description below for a list of books referenced in this video.